Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat sermon by Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
In a world of social media influencers and news that is more often trying to sell you a particular point of view than just explain what's happening in the world, the story of Bilam is a very modern one. For those of you who read my Taste of Torah this week, you have learned that I believe that Bilam was gaslit and therefore underwent a certain amount of psychological confusion and frustration before finding his own way. On your screens and your newspapers, you can see the same picture of current events depicted in very different ways. We, of course, saw this immediately following October 7th. Depending on if the news outlet was trying to support Israel or Hamas, certain parts of a photo were highlighted or deleted. Any translation is an interpretation, as one of my teachers, Rabbi Sean Fieldsmeyer, always says. And a news article or a news photograph is at times a translation of an event and therefore its own interpretation. Bilam, throughout the entire story, is told not to use his own voice, as Leora taught us earlier. God says, "My words you will do." Interesting that God already knows that the words used will not just be said, but will have actions associated. Bilam follows God's orders, shares God's words, and gives blessings on God's behalf. So where's Bilam in all of this? Where's his voice? Where are his ideas? Where are his questions or concerns or attitudes or personality? The first time we see Bilam acting on his own accord is when he is beating his donkey because he cannot see the angel in the road. And it's clear that that is not his true self either, but rather a reactive type of behavior to this annoying situation. At the end of Bilam's story, there's a moment of his own light that shines through. In chapter 24, verses 1 through 5, we read, Vayar Bilam ki tov be'enei Adonai levarech et Yisrael. So Bilam knew that it pleased God to bless Israel. He did not on previous occasions go in search of omens. Likrat nachashim vayesh et midbar fanav. Instead, he turned his face towards the wilderness. Vayisa Bilam et einav, and he lifted up his eyes. Vayar et Israel, and he saw Israel. Shochen lishvatav v'tehi alav ruach Elohim. He could see that they were encamped by tribes, by neighborhoods, and the Spirit of God came upon him. Taking up his theme, he said, the word of Bilam, son of Beor, word of the man whose eye is true, word of one who hears God's speech, who beholds visions from the Almighty, prostrate but with eyes unveiled. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings of Israel. Bilam knows that part of his job, part of his responsibility, and part of his joy comes from pleasing God. But instead of searching for that which would only satisfy God, Bilam chooses to use his own eyes, his own spiritual connection, and his own feelings to give this blessing, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. This blessing that, as I mentioned earlier, we say every day. And yet, it's not in the format of other blessings we are used to, but rather it's an acknowledgement of our people together, communally, and the joy that that brought Bilam to see. Finally, in this moment, we see who Bilam is. Someone who wants to please others by noticing and reflecting on what his people need. In our Talmud, Bava Batra 60a, we learn that a person cannot have an entrance to their home, nor an open window towards a communal courtyard. Why? For privacy of others and for yourself. And where do we learn this, the rabbis ask? From this blessing that Bilam gives. He lifts his eyes and saw everyone dwelling by tribes. And so the rabbis expound that he was inspired that their entrances were not aligned with one another. The privacy allows for God to rest within their homes. Bilam not only finds his voice by seeing and thinking and feeling for people on his own, but Bilam finds his voice in a way that impacts how we now build community in meaningful ways. Leora, you can actually come up here, and you don't need your siddur anymore. You can leave it. You have a strong voice, and I know that it's sometimes hard to use, as you shared with us in your drash. When we're growing up, we feel, as Bilam did at the beginning of his story, needing to do what others tell us to do. Whether that's family or friends or teachers, we always hope that those people have our best interest in mind, of course, but it's also important to begin to hear our own voices come through. As a bat mitzvah, you now have a place in community as a Jewish adult with a full and powerful voice. And not only can you use it to make change, but you can use it to share blessing and to ask important questions that adults around you may not be able to see or understand. You and Bilam have a lot in common, and I know that you've seen that over the course of writing your drash and learning your Torah. So now, I want you to feel like not only are you more capable of listening to your own conscience and coming up with your own ideas and thoughts, but you can use your own voice to share those blessings with our world like Bilam did. Your voice matters, as did his. My blessing to you is that you always know the strength behind your voice. That you know the strength behind your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, and to know when to listen and when to be influenced by others, but when to tune everyone out also, and to look up and to take a deep breath and to believe in yourself.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org